The paper cup trembled in Corin Vale's exhausted hands as the morning sun spilled through the café window. He had not slept properly in months, and the bitter coffee tasted like the only thing keeping his body upright. Outside, the city pulsed with ordinary life, cars honking, office workers rushing, the smell of fresh bread drifting from a nearby bakery. Yet inside Corin's chest, something far heavier than fatigue had begun to stir. Within the next few minutes, he would hear words that would shatter the illusion he had been living under for years. Before we continue this emotional story, take a moment to support the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who keep going even when life becomes unbearable, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that might need them the most. Corin Vale had once been a hopeful man. Years earlier, he worked a single modest job repairing electrical systems in apartment buildings. He had laughter in his voice back then and sunlight in his eyes. That was before the divorce, before the avalanche of debts, before he convinced himself that love meant sacrificing everything, even for someone who had already walked away. His ex-wife, Marissa Crown, had left him 3 years earlier after a bitter separation that drained every ounce of peace from his life. What remained after the divorce papers were signed was a mountain of financial obligations she had accumulated during their marriage, credit cards, personal loans, and a few reckless investments that collapsed overnight. Somehow, through manipulation and guilt, Marissa convinced Corin that helping her pay them off was the honorable thing to do. She framed it as closure, as responsibility, as the final act of kindness between two people who once loved each other. And Corin believed her. So he worked. Every morning began before sunrise. He delivered newspapers across quiet suburban streets while the sky slowly shifted from black to pale blue. After that, he rushed to his day job fixing electrical systems in aging buildings where flickering lights and broken wiring kept him on his feet for hours. When evening came, instead of resting, he stocked shelves at a grocery store. After midnight, he drove for a ride-share service, ferrying strangers through glowing streets while fighting to keep his eyes open. 5 jobs. 5 relentless cycles of exhaustion. 5 pieces of his life traded for debts that were never truly his. By the time the sun rose again, Corin would return to his small apartment, collapse onto the couch, and sleep just long enough to survive another day. He told himself it would end soon. Just one more payment. Just a few more months. Then he would finally be free. That belief kept him alive. On this particular morning, however, fate had quietly rearranged the pieces of his life. Corin had stopped by a café between shifts, hoping caffeine might sharpen his fading focus. The place buzzed with daytime energy, laptops clicking, espresso machines hissing, sunlight warming wooden tables. He chose a seat in the corner, rubbing his aching shoulders while checking the balance of the loan he had nearly finished paying. Only a few thousand left. After 3 years of relentless labor, freedom felt close enough to touch. Then he heard a familiar laugh. It drifted across the café like a distant echo from another lifetime. Corin's head slowly turned toward a table near the window. There sat Marissa Crown. She looked radiant, relaxed, and completely untouched by the burdens that had consumed his life. Her clothes were elegant, her posture confident, her hair catching the sunlight as she leaned toward a group of well-dressed friends. Corin felt his chest tighten. He had not seen her in months. Part of him wanted to leave immediately, but exhaustion rooted him to the chair. He lowered his gaze toward his coffee, hoping she would not notice him. Then her voice carried across the room. Not loud, but sharp enough to reach his ears. Marissa was laughing. Not the warm laugh he once loved, but a careless, amused one. She spoke casually about her life, about vacations she planned, about shopping trips and late-night parties. Then the conversation shifted toward finances. And suddenly, the laughter grew sharper. Marissa began describing how she had managed to avoid paying most of her debts. She spoke about legal loopholes, clever paperwork, and how someone else had taken care of the hard part. Corin's heartbeat slowed. A strange, cold stillness spread through his body. Then came the words that would haunt him forever. Marissa proudly explained to her friends that her ex-husband had been paying everything for years. She described him as a gullible man who believed he was doing the right thing. Her friends chuckled as she joked about having what she called a personal slave who worked day and night while she lived her life. The laughter at that table felt louder than thunder. Corin sat frozen. For a moment, the cafe sounds disappeared. The sunlight, the clinking cups, the chatter of strangers, all of it faded behind a wave of realization that struck him with devastating clarity. 3 years. 3 years of broken sleep. 3 years of aching muscles. 3 years of believing he was helping someone heal. And all along, he had been nothing more than a joke. But something unexpected happened in that moment. Corin did not explode with anger. He did not confront her. Instead, a quiet calm settled over him, like the stillness after a storm. For the first time in years, he saw the truth clearly. Not the version of reality Marissa had carefully built around him, but the simple, undeniable truth that he had been giving his life to someone who never valued it. And once that truth settled in his heart, something powerful awakened. Self-respect. Corin finished his coffee slowly. The bitter taste no longer bothered him. In fact, it felt strangely grounding, like the final chapter of a painful story closing at last. He opened his banking app and stared at the remaining balance of the debt. A few $1,000s. Just a few more weeks of suffering. But then another thought entered his mind. Why? Why should he finish paying for someone who mocked his sacrifices? Why should his future remain chained to a past that had already betrayed him? Corin closed the app. For the first time in years, he stood up without feeling the crushing weight of obligation on his shoulders. Outside, the daytime sun felt brighter than usual. The world looked different. Not because the city had changed, but because Corin finally had. That afternoon, he made a decision that would quietly transform the rest of his life. He contacted a financial advisor and began the process of legally separating himself from the remaining debts. It would not be simple, but it was possible. More importantly, he resigned from 2 of his 5 jobs that very day. For the first time in 3 years, Corin allowed himself to breathe. The following weeks were not easy. Recovery rarely is. But something remarkable began to happen as the exhaustion slowly lifted. Corin started repairing more than just electrical systems, he began repairing his own life. He reconnected with old friends, rediscovered hobbies he once loved, and eventually opened a small repair business that allowed him to work reasonable hours. The man who once survived on 4 hours of sleep began waking up with something he had not felt in years. Hope. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and engage with the video. Stories like Corin's remind us how powerful self-worth can be, and how life can change the moment we decide we deserve better. And before the ending, here is a special request for you. Comment the word, strength, if you believe no one deserves to be treated like they are disposable. Because sometimes the most powerful victories are quiet ones. The moment a tired man finishes his coffee, stands up from a table, and finally walks away from the life that was slowly breaking him.